Good evening. I pray you are well and staying safe. Today is Tuesday, June 9th, 2020, and it is another edition of our daily Bible study. We are in the book of Matthew, chapter 4, 23, through chapter 5, chapter 13. So, verse 13. So, I'm going to ask you to please pause your videos here to go get your Bibles. If you do not have a Bible at home, the link to the Bible reading today is in this email. So it is always best before we read the gospel to pray. So I am continuing with this prayer. I think it's the most proper prayer. Again, any prayer will do. Our Father, Kyrie eleison, whatever prayer you can find that helps you connect with God and ask God to be enlightened and illumined by what you read in the Bible. So this prayer of the Holy Gospel is read during the Divine Liturgy, right before the Gospel reading. While the Psalty is reading the epistle reading, I'm sensing the Gospel, and I'm reading this prayer while I'm sensing it, right before the Gospel reading. Let us pray to the Lord. Lord, have mercy. Shine in our hearts, O Master, who loves mankind, the pure light of your divine knowledge, and open the eyes of our mind that we may comprehend the proclamations of your Gospels. Instill in us also reverence for your blessed commandments, so that, having trampled down all carnal desires, we may lead a spiritual life, both thinking and doing all those things that are pleasing to you. For you, Christ our God, are the illumination of our souls and bodies, and to you we offer up glory together with your Father, who is without beginning, and your holy and life-creating Spirit, now and forever, to the ages of ages. Amen. So let me begin. Again, we are in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 4, 23, verse 23, through chapter 5, verse 13. I begin. And Jesus went about all Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the gospel of the kingdom, and healing all kinds of sickness and all kinds of disease among the people. Then his fame went throughout all Syria, and they brought to him all sick people who were afflicted with various diseases and torments, and those who were demon-possessed, epileptics and paralytics, and he healed them. Great multitudes followed him from Galilee and from Decapolis, Jerusalem, Judea, and beyond the Jordan. And seeing the multitudes, he went up on a mountain, and when he was seated, his disciples came to him. Then he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when they revile and persecute you and say all kinds of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its flavor, how shall it be seasoned? It is then good for nothing but to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. So, we are here right now at the beginning of Jesus' ministry. And this is a summary by St. Matthew, really of the beginning of his ministry. So this is not something that's happening in one day, most likely. It's not something happening, it's just happening over time. What preceded this immediately, okay, this is immediately after his baptism and Jesus' temptation in the desert, okay? When Jesus went into the desert for 40 days and was tempted by the devil. So this is Jesus now at the very beginning of his ministry, where he's teaching in the synagogues, he's healing and whatnot. So why is it important for Matthew to tell us about what Jesus is doing here? Why does Matthew give us a small summary about this? Well, like I said, this is the beginning of Jesus' ministry here, right? And what Matthew is bringing out here is that the Messiah is here. This is the general. Remember I said yesterday in the first, on Monday, June 8th, yesterday, about the Gospel of Matthew. The overview of it is that Matthew, who's writing to a Greek-speaking Jewish community, is imparting on them that this is the Messiah of who the prophet spoke about, right? So here he is. And by doing this, if you know the Old Testament, Isaiah, a lot of these, Elisha, Micah, who are speaking about how the Messiah will be doing these things, right? These words never came out. We've never heard words like this before from a man. So this is Jesus now. He's teaching in the synagogues, right? It says it again. It's right here. He went about all Galilee, teaching in the synagogues, preaching the gospel of the kingdom, right? So he's preaching the gospel, teaching in the synagogues. He's healing sicknesses and diseases of all different kinds, right? He's casting out demons, right? Curing epileptics and paralytics. And all these things are Jesus's glorification of God through his works. This is how, remembering the Gospel of John, the same thing, this is how we see God through Jesus's works, right? So even if we didn't believe in Jesus himself, or even if they didn't believe in Jesus himself, he has to believe in my works, because these glorify God. So Matthew's doing the same thing here, but he's writing to a different community, okay? And this community would understand what he's saying here. So if we read further on, right? And really, he goes about all of Galilee, right? And his fame went about throughout all Syria. And they brought him all these sick people, right? And great multitudes, great crowds started following him from, it says, they came from Galilee and from Decapolis and from Jerusalem, Judea, and beyond the Jordan. Why now is Matthew at the end of this little passage summarizing Jesus' ministry? Why is it important for him to even mention where they're all coming from, right? It's to show the power of God, right? The universality of God. He's saying, look, Jesus is going only about in Galilee, but in all these other regions, right, to the ends of the earth even, you might even say, that God's power is being felt that far, that people are going back and it's spreading like wildfire, right? And it shows also, Matthew is saying, these people are coming from far away because they know that the man who's healing, they say, oh, this must be the Messiah we're waiting for. Look at what he's doing. He's doing the works that we were promised the Messiah would do for us, right? And Matthew's also showing, by great crowds coming from far away, the magnitude, the magnificence of these miracles. They're not just small, like, I have a sneeze and Jesus made me feel better, or he fed me. That anybody, I'm going to get him food. No, Jesus he's healing diseases that have never been healed before. Paralytics, making them walk again. The blind, healing the blind. So these are magnificent miracles, and of which the fame goes so far. So Matthew's saying, look how great that they're being heard from far, far away. Matthew's also showing this faith of people in God. Okay? They trust God to some level. Maybe only for bodily and temporal repair or temporal gain, right? Remember, Jesus said in the book of John, he fed them the 5,000, but I am the bread of life. This bread you'll be hungry again, but from me you'll never hunger, or from this well you'll thirst again, but if you drink from me you'll never be thirsty again. This is Matthew's way of doing it, right? Matthew's showing in this little passage about Jesus beginning his ministry how it just took off, and the power of God was revealed on earth, and everybody recognized it. Okay, people were coming from the miracles were so magnificent, they were being heard from far away, and those faith of those people, it compelled them, even if it was for a temporal fix, for a temporal healing, it compelled them to run to Jesus because he represented God for them. Okay, they saw the power of God in Jesus Christ. So this is Matthew doing that, right? Okay, so we read further on, and Jesus seeing the multitudes now. Now, this is not in a moment, right? Jesus is not healing in one day. It's not happening on one day. But the crowds keep coming and coming and coming. And at one point, Jesus sees this great crowd. Now remember, he's been teaching in the synagogues, keep that in mind, and preaching the gospel, right? So the gospel of salvation, the gospel of heaven. So Jesus now sees a multitude of people, and he wants to preach to them. He wants to give them something. So he goes up on a hill, and here it says a mountain, and when we think mountain, we think very high. It's high enough, okay? But Matthew points that out here for a reason. Again, the gospel writers are very careful about what they're saying, and they're doing it for a reason. So Matthew points out this location that Jesus needs to go up where he can be seen, all right? What he had to say was extremely important, so Jesus wanted to find a place suitable that everybody would hear him. That's how important this is, right? There was a great crowd of people, right? A multitude. Jesus sees the multitudes. That means a great crowd of people. 100, 200, maybe 1,000, right? But it needed to be heard. Now, there were no microphones back then, right? So Jesus has to find a place where his voice will be heard by everyone, okay? And he's going to speak in a very not screaming tone, but he's speaking, but the people will be able to hear him. And he wanted to be seen by all of them. He wanted their attention. Because what he was going to tell them was extremely important for them. And he wanted to see them all as well. Because what he was going to tell them was about something that was coming from his compassion, all right? This is really why, and I would ask him, why did Jesus even want to talk to these multitudes of people, right? Again, we see him preaching in the synagogues, but he has compassion on all of us. And Jesus sees these people, he's not going to just heal the sick. He wants them to know what's happening. Because what he's really here for is for our salvation. And this is what it's about to get into right now. Okay? What's going to happen. So Jesus wants to speak to them. There's an important reason that he wants to speak to them. And Matthew's pointing that out here. He feels compassion for these people. Okay? Those who are now becoming disciples. He had been speaking in the synagogues for a while anyway, so he's been teaching different people as he's been traveling throughout Galilee, because it says he went throughout Galilee teaching in the synagogues and preaching the gospel, right? So he's come across probably these groups of people before, and they probably heard some of these things before. And, in the book of Luke, we see the kind of the same Sermon on the Mount, but most scholars and most early church fathers don't believe it's the same exact time or place. It may have been, Jesus may have had this same sermon, if you will, about several times in different forms or another, omitting things here, adding things there. It's important for Jesus to speak to them because he wants them to understand what he's here for, to manifest God's love, right? To glorify God. And he does that. He wants them to know, look, I've been teaching you, I've been preaching this gospel, I've been healing diseases and exorcising demons. But not from me, to glorify God. This all comes from God. So what is the message that Jesus wants that's so important for Jesus to go up on a hill to be heard, right? And this is a beautiful, one last thing. Then he opened his mouth and taught them. In the gospel, even in the Old Testament, when you opened your mouth, you knew what the speaker was about to say was very important. It's kind of like, pay attention here. You need to hear this. Then he opened his mouth. That's kind of, again, let us be attentive. That same broskomen that we hear in the liturgy before the readings. He opened his mouth. It means what he's about to say is very, very important. And here is what he says. Blessed are the poor in spirit, the Beatitudes, right? For theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, that shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when they revile and persecute you, say all kinds of evil against you, falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Okay? So it's this word blessed here. And we want to focus on this for a minute. What is Christ's message to these people? The Greek word is what you need to understand. Makari. Blessed is about the best translation. You can even say maybe rejoice. It's Makari is more of a wish. Not I wish for something for myself. But Christ is saying, my wish for you, my promise to you, okay, is that all of you who suffer, who have been suffering in this temporal world, who've been suffering with the sin of Adam and Eve, you will not suffer in the kingdom of heaven, okay? So the message lies in that key word, makari. It's different than the word evlogia, blessings, which are good words, right? Good things. This is, and it's more than just a sense of you should be happy because if you do this, this will happen. No, it's God's wish for us, God's promise to us. All right? Listen again, it's got this dichotomy to it, right? So he starts out, blessed are the poor in spirit. Okay? For theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So because you're doing good things and your spirit is troubled, sometimes beaten, but you're still trying to do the good thing, you will receive the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. After the resurrection, death is different, right? Death is no longer permanent. It's only resurrection, right? And that's a different resurrection. When I say there's only resurrection, please understand that there's a resurrection of life, there's a resurrection of judgment, and then judgment is not hell. Judgment is kind of that gospel we read where Christ says, when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. That's the judgment, the final judgment. And we're either going to live with God, eternally moving towards him, or we're going to live with God, but away from him, eternally moving away. And it's a horrible thing to still see God, but keep moving away. And not turning our back, but keep moving away from him, because we've done that to ourselves. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. So it's this dichotomy of suffering here, but living eternally without suffering, right? So living here temporally with suffering, and those who do that will live eternally without suffering. And also, as if you see the things that are happening here, they become closer and closer to Christ, right? So first you have blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are those who mourn, blessed are the meek, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, but now you have blessed are the merciful. I want to just pay a little more time with this. Blessed are the merciful. So if you are merciful, you will obtain mercy. So now, it's not just about suffering and then receiving good things, it's about how you act here. Blessed are the pure in heart, for you will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, who shall be called sons of God. So you have these ideas of there's an air of suffering, there's a sense of suffering, but you're suffering for Christ, you're suffering for God, you're suffering for right things. And then here are the things if you're suffering to be merciful, if you're suffering to be pure of heart, if you're suffering to be a peacemaker. To be merciful doesn't mean, it's not always easy. You may have to be poor in spirit, right? To be pure in heart, you may have to be meek. To be a peacemaker, that always easy? No. take on a lot of suffering sometimes for that. Jesus brought peace in the world, and he ended up on a cross. Here's the summary of that. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. To be merciful, to be pure in heart, to be a peacemaker. Right? For your spirit to be drained and to be meek and to hunger and thirst for righteousness' sake, right? When you hunger and thirst for righteousness, not for food, hunger and thirst for righteousness, when you want things to be right, according to God, you're going to suffer if that's not the way it is, right? So, if you're persecuted for all that, yours is the kingdom of heaven. He's saying, I'm here now. I am the Son of God. Matthew's saying, this is the Messiah. Listen to him. He's offering us a new kingdom where the suffering for those who are righteous, the suffering of those who are righteous, does not exist in this new kingdom. This is a very beautiful passage in Matthew, and it really gives us the message that Jesus is the Messiah. He is the Son of God, and he's here to save us all. And that we need to look to heaven and sometimes rejoice in our suffering here and thank God for it. Because we know that sometime, some point, when we leave this earth, we will be in a place where suffering does not exist for us. Try to imagine that. That's a beautiful, beautiful idea. Remember, God loves us all. God bless you. Have a good evening. Good night.